if anyone has changed not just their character and their moral outlook, but their actual policy views and what they think are radical, it's Lindsey Graham.
He was running against Trump and denouncing Trump in the most, as strongly as Jeb Bush and everyone
calling
else.
Me to try to strategize on how we can defeat Trump and talking where he was sounding like deranged.
The degree of flipping here and then lashing out, that needs its own psychoanalyst.
All right, and we're back with Bill Kristol Monday. That was my Saturday night in Detroit with Mallory McMorrow. I was feeling a little uptight, but she is a spitfire. We needed that. We need a little positive energy. I was sorry to miss you there, Bill, but I think maybe Mallory was a little bit more yin to your yang, which was needed, I think, for our crew.
I'm sure she was both yin and yang, or whatever that means. I've never been quite clear on what that was, but anyway,
me neither. Actually,
I had to leave. Yes, I had to leave the excellent Bulwark Swing State tour after Thursday night in Philadelphia, where I thought it was terrific. So I missed Pittsburgh and Detroit. So how were those?
Yeah, Pittsburgh was kind of emo. Pittsburgh was a little emo, and it was maybe my fault, but I'm pissed. I mean, it's the same thing. It's just like, it's hard for me to get past. It's not so much pessimism about Kamala's chances, though I think that, I wish we were in better shape, as it is just despair over the fact that, like, we have to sweat this out after everything. And so I maybe got a little bit too into the despair side of things. We rebalanced it in Detroit, towards, the cri de coeur, the call to action. But it was great. My family came to both of those. People got to meet everybody. The crowd was great. And I love Detroit, by the way. Donald Trump says, it's a bad thing that America is becoming Detroit. If only America became Detroit. Detroit's awesome.
I told Susan when I got back from that, we're at a family wedding this weekend. So when I got back from Philly on Friday, that it was really, inspiring. It's not quite, invigorating, I guess is the word I'm looking for. I mean, people were really excited to be there, excited to see people like themselves. An awful lot of ex-Republicans, some normal Democrats, I would say, who like the Bulwark too. And a nice mix of people feeling self-consciously that they were part of something bigger than any one campaign for one person. I thought that was interesting, how much people really have that sense. Maybe everyone has that sense this year because so much is at stake. But certainly if you're not a traditional down-the-line Democrat, you more likely have that sense, right? And so, sorry to miss Pittsburgh and Detroit.
That was wonderful. I totally agree with that sense of invigoration. Is that a word? Being invigorated.
Yeah.
All right. We also have other news today, other Bulwark news. Our colleague, our publisher, our leader, Sarah Longwell, is in Pennsylvania. We're taping this Monday morning. We tape these on Monday morning. They come out for you all in the afternoon. So by the time this is out, Sarah will already have hosted a town hall with Kamala Harris and Liz Cheney, trying to reach these remaining, hangers-on, Nikki Haley type voters. Our old colleague Charlie Sykes is doing a similar conversation with Kamala in Wisconsin. So I think it speaks to how focused the campaign is on all that. I want to get into that a little bit at the end of the pod, but it also is just, it's pretty great for Sarah, and it's pretty great that they're doing this, I think, and that I think that their eye is on the ball of one of essentially two key groups of people they got to speak to the last few weeks.
Yeah, I was advocating within the Bulwark in Slack that we put up giant billboards. Sarah Longwell, Chester County, Pennsylvania. Also, also whatever, Kamala Harris, Liz Cheney.
Perry County, I think. I think she was Perry County.
Is it Perry County? Wherever
Perry
it is.
County,
but we should, they didn't, my colleagues didn't go along with that. So Kamala and Liz are getting equal billing with Sarah, which I think is fine. I mean, give them a little bump. Give them a little bump up in recognition.
For now, I think it's fair.
Esteem.
Yeah. So we'll be excited. So people want to hear more about that. We'll have the full conversation and some analysis up on YouTube. All right, let's get down to business. Somebody else had less kind things to say about Liz Cheney. I think Judge Liz Cheney a little more maybe harshly than Sarah Longwell, and we have at the Bulwark. I want to listen to the Republican vice presidential nominee for some reason ranting about Liz Cheney over the weekend.
And what they will tell you to a person is that Liz Cheney is motivated by an obsessive hatred of the people who cost her Wyoming congressional seat, she is not motivated by a love of this country. She's a resentful, petty, small person, and if Kamala Harris wants to parade her around, she's welcome to.
Projection much? Resentful, petty, small. That describes JD about as well as I think any three adjectives could. I don't know. What say you? How can you psychoanalyze JD Vance there for me?
It's too unpleasant to do so at any great length, but I could briefly. But my the first point, it's not worth even rebutting, but just to be simple about it.
Sure.
Liz Cheney broke with Trump, obviously before January 6th, but let's just say over January 6th. She broke with him once she saw, definitively with him once she saw what he was trying to do after the election. So that was January 6th, 2021. She knew very well it could cost her congressional seat, and it did in 2022. The idea that she's motivated by resentment and losing the congressional seat is just, it's leaving everything else aside that's unfair and stupid about it. It's literally incoherent. She was fighting Trump for a year and a half before she lost her congressional seat.
Right.
The J6.
By the way, she spent most of her time in the J6 committee, versus the primary, right? Like, if she had actually cared about her congressional seat that much, she would have had a very different approach.
I guess it's revealing, if you want to get in the psychoanalytic business, that J.D. Vance can't imagine, on the other hand, anyone being willing to sacrifice the number 3 spot in the House Republicans, a very bright future, the congressional seat. She still has a bright future in my view, but let's say a more straightforwardly bright future in the Republican Party. And J.D. Vance can't imagine anyone being willing to sacrifice that for a matter of principle or honor or the good of the country. The other point, I think I make this point in Morning Shots this morning, that J.D. Vance, of course, was a never-Trumper, sort of, in 2016, 2017. Yeah. And I do think the ex-never-Trumpers have a particular bile and sort of resentment and envy, maybe even, of the people who just were never Trumpers and stayed with it. The two people who were most vitriolic over the weekend about, in J.D. Vance's case, Liz Cheney, the other one was Lindsey Graham, about Trump, any Republican who's supporting Harris, and they kind of pretend they can't even imagine how it could be the case, whereas they were examples of this case 7 or 8 years ago.
Well, it does. It's like this. You have to do this performative anger, right, to overcompensate for your failings, right? Like, it's you can't just be like, they're wrong, right? Like, you have to convince yourself that they are morally bad, right? That we are morally bad to compensate for your own kind of deep down gnawing sense that you've made a moral sacrifice, right? That they have to even the score in their head. I felt this way about my exchange with Lindsey. I was going to do it later, but now that you mention it, let's actually just listen to Lindsey on Meet the Press and really get our hackles up this morning.
Terrorists residing in our backyard. It was their decision to stop energy production, making us more energy independent. It was their decision to abandon Israel at their time of need when it came to weapons.
Senator, the U.S. is making more energy than
I think
point.
These generals are wrong.
They worked for Donald Trump.
You know what? I know,
they worked for former President Trump. These are former Trump administration
To every Republican
officials
supporting her, what the hell are you doing? You're supporting the most radical nominee in the history of American politics. The Green New Deal, Medicare for all.
I wanted to play a little longer clip than just the "what the hell are you doing," so you can just see how shallow this argument is, right? That it's like to demonstrate that she's radical, it has to be she's for the Green New Deal and Medicare for all, which she's not campaigning on and has no chance to pass, even in the most rosiest possible outcome for the Democrats in the Senate this year. You have to argue that they abandoned Israel in the time of need, right? At a moment where the New York Times is reporting about all of the intelligence support we've been providing Israel. The argument is so shallow that they have to convince themselves of that to make this just like fake anger, over the top, kind of judgmental argument to offset the fact that they obviously know better, because they told us that they know better. They told us in J.D. Vance's case that God wants better of us, so they know better. So this is how they lash out.
Yeah, totally. Kamala Harris was part of an administration that rejected the Green New Deal, that rejected Medicare for all, and that stood by Israel. One or two things I might have done a little differently, but 95% stood by Israel. And so these are Lindsey Graham's examples of how radical Kamala Harris is. And incidentally, it's Trump is the most, if you really wanted to say someone was the most radical candidate in modern American history, that would be Donald Trump. If you take radical in the sense of not left or right, but just challenging the underlie the constitutional order, the norms and the institutions, the consensus that's guided American politics more or less for 70, 80 years, and foreign policy certainly, but I'd say at home too in the last 50, 60 years. That's Trump. I mean, they're proud of being radical, incidentally. Trump and Heritage Foundation and J.D. Vance, they're not interested in just tweaking the system or improving it a bit or continuing some reforms or correcting some previous reforms. They want to overthrow it all. What was the book, the Heritage guy's book that Vance wrote the preface for? Then they pulled it back because it was too controversial. Burned it all down. Yeah, Trump is the radical. I'm just literally, analytically, empirically, Trump is the radical, and now Lindsey Graham is pretending that, Kamala Harris, unbelievable radical, prosecutor in California and vice president to Joe Biden.
Yeah, give me a break. The other thing just that is maybe only matters to you and me, Bill, but it's just worth sitting on for a second, because we get this, like, you've changed so much, you've gone so far, to the left. Like, these issues that he's talking about, like that if anyone has changed not just their character and their moral outlook, but their actual policy views and what they think are radical, it's Lindsey Graham. I mean, Lindsey Graham and John McCain were at the hip in that 2008 campaign, which included, among other policy planks, a belief that we should have some kind of cap and trade deal to deal with climate, a belief that climate change was a problem, a belief that we need immigration reform, we need legalization for dreamers, and we need to secure the border too, but some kind of comprehensive immigration reform. A belief that America needs to be strong in the world stage and counter Russia and counter dictators. I mean, if you just think about that McCain campaign in 2008, like, those are kind of the core issues. At least the most defining issues. They might not have been the issues that were at the top of his list, because they were the ways that he was kind of distinguishing himself from the other Republicans in the primary. And so, like, he's abandoned all that. Like, he's, for a candidate now that wants mass deportations, like we've never seen before, and that doesn't believe climate change is real, and wants to hand over Eastern Europe to Putin. And he doesn't seem to have any reflection on that at all.
Yeah, you have to pretend that just doesn't exist. Trump's not going to do all the things he and J.D. Vance have said they're going to do.
Okay. Now I'm angry.
We've worked that out. We've worked that out.
We have.
I would say Vance is more. I don't know which is more contemptible. Vance is an opportunist who saw his chance as a young man. So he saw his chance years ago, and now he continues to be opportunistic. I think he's a more simple case in a certain way. Lindsey Graham is a pretty interesting and complicated case, because I worked very closely with him, and quite closely with him in the 2000s. We were both for the Iraq War. We did a lot on the foreign policy front together. I was close to McCain. Lindsey was really McCain's top kind of deputy, you might say, in the Senate, and a very good tactician on a lot of this stuff. For him to go, and then as late as 2016, he was not just like J.D. Vance, had written a book and was on a couple of talk shows saying, I don't like Trump. He was running against Trump and denouncing Trump in the most as strongly as Jeb Bush and everyone
calling
else.
Me to try to strategize on how we can defeat Trump, and talking where he was sounding like deranged.
The degree of flipping here and then lashing out, that needs its own psychoanalyst.
Yeah, it does. Well, finally, one last thing then on psychoanalysis, because we were at our Philly event. We were at the same hotel where I encountered Lindsey a couple weeks ago during the debate, and I was just reflecting back on it. It was interesting. Like, when he first sees me and I first go up to him. And I said something first. I forget. I said something kind of teasing, joking about, how Trump's performance was so bad. Like, he's always welcome back on side or something like that. And he immediately blows his top and goes straight to, how do you sleep at night, to me. And there's something to be said for that. Right? I'm like, how do I sleep at night? How do you sleep? What do you mean? But the fact that you feel like you have to go to that place, right? To me, tells me that you might be having some problems sleeping at night. Y'all, I was never really a mushroom man growing up. Well, get your head out of the gutter, but you know what I mean. I didn't like to eat the portobellas or whatever. And sometimes taste buds change. I became a grown-up. My child likes mushrooms, so I started cooking them for her. And it turns out I love mushrooms. So I was excited when we had this new sponsor for the podcast, Mudwater. Mudwater is a coffee alternative filled with chai, lion's mane, reishi, mushrooms, turmeric, cinnamon, and a bunch of other stuff. And that way you get your energy fix without your heart doing jazz hands every afternoon. Mud water is like coffee's chill, yoga-loving cousin who went on a spiritual retreat and came back more zen and without any of the jitters. Imagine being alert and calm at the same time while not having trouble falling asleep at night. Look, this happens in your 40s. Don't tell anybody I'm in my 40s. But you start having that afternoon coffee, and you start paying for that at bedtime. And you start scrolling through TikTok and watching the UGA bro go up to people at the tailgate and mispronounce Kamala's name and ask them if they're going to vote for her. And then you have even more trouble sleeping. So I needed to find something a little bit more to bring a little more balance to my life. Something to give me enough energy to do the YouTube content in the afternoon and the evenings, but that wouldn't keep me rolling around in bed. And mud water has been a good option. Every single ingredient in Mud Water's products are 100% USDA certified, organic, non-GMO. There's also zero sugar and no sweeteners added. To use Mud Water, you simply drop the powder into your favorite mug, pour some water on it, and give it a mix. Some go wild and add creamer, honey, or even CBD, but not me. The best part about Mud Water is it provides sustained energy without the spikes and crashes of traditional coffee. Head to mudwater.com and grab your starter kit. For a limited time, our listeners get up to 43% off your entire order, free shipping, and a free rechargeable frother when you use code TheBulwark. That's up to 43% off your order with code TheBulwark at MUDWTR.com. After you purchase, they ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Stay energized and refreshed all year long with Mud Water, because life's too short for anything less than natural, delicious energy. Okay. Trump over the weekend, he I don't even know what to do with him. I mean, he's totally off the handle at his rallies. We discussed at the Detroit event the kind of 12-minute excursion conversations about Arnold Palmer's oversized 3-wood, and he like can't help talking about how he's not having cognitive decline, and he's not actually almost 80. He said that at one point. In addition to that, he's been lashing out at Kamala Harris in more overt ways. I just want to play one clip from his rally over the weekend.
And this one, Kamala is further left than them. So you have to tell Kamala Harris that you've had enough, that you just can't take it anymore. We can't stand you. You're a shit vice president. The worst. You're the worst vice president. Kamala, you're fired. Get the hell out of here. You're fired.
I mean, I don't mind cussing. We do some cussing on this podcast. But it's totally deranged behavior for a presidential candidate 2 weeks out.
Yeah, and of course, what's distressing is the cheering that greets the vulgarity, the bullying, the more vehemently bullying the vulgarity is, as opposed to just maybe cavalier, kind of more like the Arnold Palmer thing, which whatever, it's not what a presidential candidate should be saying, but that is locker room talk, if you to use the phrase that he used about his the Access Hollywood
Billy
tape.
Bush.
The fact that the cheer, they like the bullying, they like the pseudo strongman. That's depressing.
Yeah, and it's the asymmetry of it. You know what I mean? Like I just kind of look back on the deplorables comment and like all of the fake, like the histrionics and the, fainting couch, hours upon hours of Fox News coverage of all this. And it's just like, there's no even attempt, try to treat this as if we're calling a fair game here, right? Like Donald Trump gets an excuse to do whatever he wants. He can just curse and demean and lie and do conspiracy theories. And if like Kamala Harris says like one thing that's a little bit harsh, it's like, what happened to the Joy campaign? And like the whole thing is preposterous. He did something smart. We can just say it. The McDonald's thing was smart. It was fake. It was totally fake. There was a practice procession with the cars that were in the drive-through. We did a practice run going through the drive-through before he got in there, and then on the video they all come up and they're not professional actors, so their acting is very poor, where they like pretend to be surprised to see him. So it was fake, but it was a good photo op. So I think we can acknowledge that, though. I don't know. You might have won the day with a very viral tweet discussing how it's a great sign for the Biden economy that felons are now getting hired at McDonald's.
So I guess the fakeness of it is more than the normal. Normally these things are sort of fake, of course. The Vance team is there, and they kind of say, look, the vice president or former President Trump will come here and buy a donut, and you can give him one of the, they kind of arrange.
You'll stock a few people in there.
But this was totally fake. This was not an open McDonald's, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Right, no, it was a closed McDonald's. So when I would bring Jeb to a place, for example, just to give people context, we'd go to a coffee shop and we'd tell 10 of our supporters, like, will you go to this coffee shop? Jeb's going to be there. But like strangers could also be there. Right. You know what I mean? So like it was quasi-fake, right? A quasi-fake photo op versus like a literal studio set to McDonald's.
I think the McDonald's thing's interesting, though. I mean, this does fit with Arnold Palmer, leaving aside the vulgarity at the end, which is Trump. He is a salesman. He is a con man. He's marketed himself to middle America forever, 40 or 50 years. And so he's not stupid in that way, right? Who does he want to be associated with in people's mind? Arnold Palmer, golfer who, if you're a little older than I am, if you're Trump's age, actually, but certainly even my age, the greatest kind of iconic golfer, and also a real gentleman, actually, and kind of had a very good post-golfing career, is my sense, and of course he invented
his daughter actually put out a statement about how he's a gentleman. And
he invented this, drink or whatever, it's an iced tea. And what is it, lemonade and iced tea? So Palmer, and then McDonald's, right? The kind of iconic American fast food institution. So in that respect, Trump does have a certain kind of not weird, it's just that's what he's been doing for 50 years, instinct to kind of, I'm in touch with you guys in middle America. You watched Arnold Palmer on TV. You watched ads with him later on. You've been to McDonald's a million times. I'm kind of a McDonald's type guy. He's so much smarter than a DeSantis type, right? Trump is. He's a more effective.
I mean, they're out of date, as your point. Like they're out of date cultural touchstones, but like they are, kind of whatever middle American cultural touchstones from 30 years ago. That's true. He does have a good instinct for that. The only other thing I think that is worth saying about the McDonald's again is just this is all like projection. Like what is underlying all this was that like there's this conspiracy that Kamala never actually worked at McDonald's, right? And it's like that is what they're doing. So literally, it's like we're accusing Kamala of being fake and saying that she worked at McDonald's when she was a teen, and in order to do so, we're going to do a fake McDonald's stop. And like it is a very kind of upside down element, but on brand for the Trump University guy. Look, as a person who is existing publicly these days, and especially somebody that shares their opinions online, I'm hyper aware of safety and security, and because it's easier than ever to find personal information about people online. All this data hanging out there on the internet can have actual consequences in the real world. It's something that I've known and experienced. That's why I personally recommend DeleteMe. DeleteMe is a subscription service that removes your personal info from hundreds of data brokers. Sign up and provide DeleteMe with exactly what information you want deleted, and their experts take it from there. DeleteMe sends you regular personalized privacy reports showing what info they found, where they found it, and what they removed. To put it simply, DeleteMe does all the hard work of wiping you and your family's personal information from data broker websites. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for DeleteMe, now at special discount for our listeners. Get 20% off your DeleteMe plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/bulwark and use promo code BULWARK at checkout. The only way to get 20% off is to go to joindeleteme.com/bulwark and enter code BULWARK at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/bulwark, code BULWARK. Hey, y'all, if you love this podcast and want to listen to all Bulwark podcasts ad-free, join Bulwark Plus today. You can click the link in this description. You'll get the best politics newsletters in the business, and you can become a Bulwark Plus member right now. We'd appreciate it. I want to get now into the nitty-gritty. of where we're at. We've had our fun. It's a super close race. I had sent you this morning. There was a good conversation with my friend John Heilman, formerly of the Circus, now at Puck, who had a lengthy discussion with David Plouffe, who's come in to be Kamala's advisor, and he is the even keeled, measured, Zen-like, whatever word you want to use. Not me. Not rain cloudy bedwetty person inside the Harris campaign, and it's worth. I'll put a link in the show notes, and it's kind of worth reading all of this if you want to dork out to see what the Harris team's POV is on the campaign. But the most interesting takeaway I think at the top level, and we can dig in, is that they have seen the race as being basically static for a little over a month, which is something Axelrod said on this podcast about a week ago too. And that the movement in the public polls towards Harris after the debate and then towards Trump in the last week, like they don't see, like they think that's kind of like a phantom movement based on crappy public polls. And that what they've seen is a very, very tight race that's close in all 7 swing states. And that is their premise as they think about the strategy and who they need to turn out for the last 2 weeks. So what did you think about the top level, and then we'll kind of get down at each element.
So I'm sure Plouffe. I think Plouffe's telling the truth here. I mean, there could have been a tiny movement, half a point one way after the debate, sure. Half point back the other. Even though that's such a tiny movement, it's basically a phantom movement, and it takes us a couple of polls being slightly off one way or the other, and every poll is going to be off a little to create that sort of illusion of movement. We've all seen this so many times in campaigns, right? It's not a real movement. A real movement would be, from zero. Well, the real movement was the movement from when she took over to when she established a small lead in the national popular vote.
Yes.
And more to the point, since that's what Plouffe's totally focused on in the swing states, pulled even in the swing states. And so she was down, he said 6 or 7. I was struck by that. Biden was down when he got out in the swing states, and she was made it an even race in the swing states. That's the real movement. Then there's been noise for the last month and a lot of, tiny oscillations. And here we are with 2 weeks left.
Yeah. The other thing that jumped out to me, because people always ask this, right? Like, who are the voters that we're talking about?
Right.
Are they even real, et cetera? And this is how Plouffe assesses it. There's 4% of the electorate, which on the one hand is really small, but it's like kind of a lot of people. We have 150 million people,
7 million voters. Yeah.
Quite a lot of voters. 4% who are still trying to decide between the two candidates, and then there's another group of people that are different. Like they're different for each campaign, who haven't firmly decided yet whether or not they're going to vote, and those are the people that you got to get off the couch. For Trump, obviously that's going to be mostly white, non-college, working class voters, and for Harris, a lot of younger voters, voters of color, et cetera. So like those are essentially the groups, and Plouffe, I think it's based on the event today with Liz Cheney and Sarah Longwell, and just kind of based on their ads and based on their behavior and based on what he said, there's no reason to think he's lying. Thinks that a big portion of that 4% are, college-educated Nikki Haley type Republicans, to use that as a shorthand.
Yeah, I think you and I have had versions of this division too, that people talk about the swing voters or the undecided voters, but it's pretty obvious when you just think about it from it. There's the sort of swingish engaged voters who are traditional Republicans, hard time voting for a Democrat, don't want to vote for Trump. Plouffe says that's 4%. He knows better than I. That sounds about right. They 1% might not vote. So if you can get 2 out of the 3 remaining percent to be for you, you pick up, you net 1%. That's pretty good in Pennsylvania.
That's a ball game. That's Michigan. A winner, chicken dinner. Yeah,
important. And that is very much the Liz Cheney, Sarah Longwell, Charlie Sykes, people who know who they are and respect them. Now, I do think the Republicans for Harris events, including the one on Thursday, also can have an effect on that second group of less engaged voters who are weakly for Harris or weakly for Trump. Because if you're a weak, Trump voter, you haven't followed things very closely, but a whole bunch of Republicans suddenly are coming out against him, and maybe it does give you pause, right? And if you're a weak Harris voter, you're reassured, even though you're not a Republican, perhaps. Oh yeah, well look, they're even there for her. So I kind of think the groups are different. I'm not sure the strategies for getting to the groups are entirely different. I mean, they're different in terms of turnout and targeting, and you have to make calls into Bucks County instead of into, Philadelphia and so forth. It's the city itself. But I think that the messages aren't that different. And for me, the core message has to be now, never Trump. I mean, I just think both of these sets of voters need to be, they like Harris well enough. That was the accomplishment of the Harris campaign in the first, 6, 7, 8 weeks. Now they just need to really be alarmed at the idea of 4 more years for Trump. And that is the closing Kamala message, I think, unhinged, unbalanced, unchecked. And it's a good, and then there are different examples you can give of that. I think that's a good message. I hope she really hammers it hard. I hope all the outside groups hammer it hard. Too many of the outside, in my opinion, Democratic super PACs are still running slightly gauzy ads. I guess it's okay on healthcare and all. I just can't believe they're moving that many voters at this point. But I think that's very important. And then I'd say Dobbs. I mean, I do think the actual one issue that some chunk of these both categories again of voters could really be engaged on is the Dobbs decision and its implications and what 4 more years of Trump would mean for personal freedoms, especially for women.
Yeah, let's actually put in that unhinged, unchecked ad that you referenced for people who aren't in swing states, want to hear what Kamala's up to.
Donald Trump makes a lot of promises, but we can be sure of one thing. If he wins, he'll ignore all checks that rein in a president's power. It's all in Trump's Project 2025 agenda. What does that mean for you? Higher cost on groceries, cuts to Social Security and Medicare, more tax breaks for billionaires, and a national abortion ban putting women's health at risk. A second Trump term, more unhinged, unstable, and unchecked.
I agree. I think that alarming people about Trump, I think that's a good ad. Alarming people about Trump is right for both of that, for that 4% group, but also for the on the couch group. Think about younger voters, right? I think about, there's a good New York Times story this morning, good and also maddening, where they're talking to like a 22-year-old in Arizona. It's like, I don't know, if the mail-in ballot shows up at my house, I guess I'll vote. I was like, you've taken in the time that you took to talk to this New York Times reporter, you could have voted, but okay. But I just think that particularly for that younger demo, I do think there's a category of people that, to use the word I hate, Trump has been normalized because he's been around their whole life, and like a little bit of a kick in the ass about scaring them, which also could be about Dobbs, also could be about the authoritarian, it could be about any, whole suite of issues. Just be like, it's just go do it. Like, go do it. Go vote against him. Like, risk is too high. I think that is a key message that works for both groups and should be what she's focused on. I do think, just to be completist, there is one other group of persuadables, which is kind of the young that we've talked about, like young men of color, that I think are in that 4% too, along with the college, Wall Street Journal, Nikki Haley voter. And so I think maybe the strategy for them is a little bit different. Right. And I do think the Trump campaign, like Trump himself has gone insane, and his performance is like a sign of that we should be deeply concerned, even more concerned than we would be baseline if he gets back in. But the campaign team itself has been laser focused on reaching those voters, and I do think that the Harris campaign could, in addition to meeting with Sarah Longwell and Liz Cheney, that should be another part of their agenda item. Is getting into venues to speak to those young voters. I know Tim Walz did a Rich Eisen interview over the weekend. Like, more is more on that front, I think, as well. So I think that basically sums up the playing field at this point. Anything else from you on that, Bill?
No, I agree with that. Yeah.
All right, I want to close. Can we close with some good news? Anytime the Russians lose, that's a win for me. It's a little country called Moldova. Have you been to Moldova?
I have not.
You've not been.
I've met. There's a wonderful woman who's prime minister. I mean, it's a tiny. What is it? 3-4 million people, something like that. Bordering on Russia. Small. It's very small. Yeah. Small, but free and democratic, and pro-Western. Yeah.
Yes, and the Russia, and there was a kind of a join the EU referendum. And the Russians were deeply involved in it. There was a rich oligarch type that was leading the campaign to oppose it. People are there was a lot of walking around money. I guess we can tie this back to American politics, as there was a lot of Elon Musk style tactics happening in the final days there, where they're handing out cash to Moldovans, telling them to vote down the referendum to join the EU, but narrowly, which might be another parallel with what's happening here, narrowly, the Moldovans decided to stay free or to become aligned with the EU and maintain their status as a free and democratic country, not within the reach of the Russian influence. And so good on you, Moldova. I don't know, Bill, if you have any closing thoughts.
I am no expert on Moldova, but I just want to emphasize this is not risk-free for the 55% or however many voted that way, and the government, which is, I mean, it's not like Russia is sitting right in their border, and they are a tiny little country, really without a military almost, or the police force kind of. And, Russia can already do a huge amount, as they have been doing in the kind of more Elon Musk way, but they can also just do a lot by pure, invasion and brute force, as they did to Georgia and Ukraine. So this is a pretty courageous. I mean, that's one reason I think the referendum was so close. I think people just are scared about their future if they go this way. But to their credit, they chose to go this way.
May we have the Moldovan courage here in America over the final 2 weeks. Thank you to Bill Kristol. Make sure to check out the Longwell, Cheney, Harris town hall on our YouTube feed when you get the chance, and we'll be back here for another edition of the Bulwark podcast tomorrow. See you all then. Peace.